بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وبعد. So a very important aspect of a student of knowledge is to have respect. So this type of knowledge that we are trying to acquire, the knowledge of deen, is not a general knowledge. It's not the knowledge that we can acquire from, public school or from any kind of secular seminary, anything like that. Rather, this is a knowledge that has come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we have mentioned before. It comes from Quran and Hadith, and these two are called wahi, or revelation. So revelation is something that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and because of that, it requires a lot of respect for us to get. So it is essential that as students of knowledge that we have the proper respect. So this in Arabic is called Adab, and even in many other languages we call this Adab. So if someone has Adab, that means that they have respect. So Adab includes everything from sitting to paying attention to one's attire. So all of these things comes into Adab. How a student behaves, how a student interacts with other students, with his own teacher, how a student carries themselves. All of these things are extremely important. There are incidents in the past amongst the Salaf where you have, Muhammad bin al-Qasim, or you have other great shuyukh in the past. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, for instance, we spoke about him in the past. Some great shuyukh in the past, great muhaddithin. They would have majalis or gatherings in which they would dictate their knowledge, whether it was hadith or whether it was fiqh or whatever the knowledge was. In these gatherings, there would be thousands and thousands of students. There would be so many students, and because they didn't have a mic system at that time, they would have different individuals in that crowd who would listen to what the sheikh says, and they would repeat it. So the sheikh would actually have certain of his close students or people that were hired for the majlis, and their job was to repeat what the sheikh says because it was so large. However, in these majalis, and Shaykh Muhammad Awwamah, hafidhahullah ta'ala, in one of his books called Adab al-Ikhtilaf, he mentions a lot of these incidents. He says that perhaps 10% of the individuals, let's say there's thousands, 10,000 people, so only 1,000 of these 10,000 people were there with ink pots and paper, and they would be writing, they would be the scribes writing down what the sheikh was saying. Now, what were everyone else doing? What was their purpose for attending that dars? If they were not writing down what the sheikh was saying, and if they were not basically recording what he was saying to learn in the future, then what was their purpose? So the sheikh says in his book that the reason why these people attended those durus was just to look at this individual, just to look at Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal and see how he behaves, how he walks, how he talks, how he carries himself. This was called hadyun or dallun in Arabic. That's what they call it, like how a teacher behaves. And Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, as well as all of these great muhaddithin, they basically took all of the hadith and they practiced upon it. And when they practiced upon it, they became a visual replica of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would behave. And they would have these adab and etiquettes. So all these people came just to look at them and to take from that and apply it into their lives. So all of this has a great spiritual effect when we have the system of learning. So this is why respect is so important, so that we can get closer to our beloved Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that we can get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Salaf, when we speak about the Salaf, we speak about the first few generations. The first few generations, we have the Sahaba, we have the Tabi'een, we have the Atba'u Tabi'een, we have those after them as well. So these, usually they mean the first three qurun, or the first three generations. Those are usually what is meant by the Salaf. More are actually included sometimes as well. So the Salaf, they were very cautious when it came to disrespect. They knew that if someone does not respect their sheikh, or any of the things that is necessary to respect, if they fail to do so, it would have a direct implication on how much knowledge they would get, because this is a spiritual thing. So if we do not have the proper etiquette and the proper respect, then it'll definitely have an effect on our knowledge. So what things do we have to respect? Some of the things that we should respect is one should have respect for one's classmates and even for one's books and utensils. So in more detail, we would have to have respect for our teachers, and each one of these is a whole separate chapter in itself, how to respect one's teacher. Then we need to respect our classmates. We need to respect our books. We need to respect our utensils. We need to respect ourselves as well. Self-respect, that is so important. And the more we have this respect, the more we will get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the more Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase us in our knowledge. One big sheikh came to us when we were students, and he told us that you people think that Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim, Imam Abu Hanifa, and he named all these imams. You think that they gained that level of knowledge just through books? He said it really was not that. It was actually the respect that they showed for ilm and for practicing this deen that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed them to gain more. Sometimes we're amazed. We hear Imam Bukhari, he had photographic memory. This sheikh had photographic memory. That sheikh had photographic memory. It seems like everyone in the past was just amazing at memorizing and learning deen. But the difference was, in the past, they had much more respect than we did. And because of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had elevated them to a higher level. So when we talk about respecting our teachers, these are, very general guidelines that we speak about just to have respect. It would take too much time to go into detail and speak about how to respect all of these things. We just have to be very respectful. Inshallah, in the future, if we have the opportunity, we can go into it in more depth and speak about each one as a separate chapter itself. So I'd like to share some incidents that are quite interesting. In this fourth point I have here, I wrote, many of the ulama do not allow students into the class if they are not in proper attire or sitting in the proper posture. And I put in brackets Ibn al-Salah. So that's an individual, Ibn al-Salah. It doesn't mean the son of namaz. It's an individual. He's a great scholar in the past. So some of these incidents may seem very difficult for us to understand, but what we don't understand is that they come in a certain context. Because we're so far away from that context, sometimes it's difficult for us to properly understand. So what this is referring to, what I put in brackets, Ibn al-Salah, was Imam Ibn al-Salah. He was a great scholar of the Shafi'i madhab. He wrote one book amongst many other books, but his book in the principle of hadith was so widely accepted that almost every single book after that was either a commentary of that book or a summary of that book or a poem of that book. Was so widely accepted. And he was appointed as a great teacher of Madrasa Ashrafiyya, which is a great madrasa in the past. So he was teaching in that madrasa, and he would teach the Sunan al-Kubra of Imam al-Bayhaqi, which is another great imam in the past. So this was a very large book. So it was recorded in certain books that Imam Ibn al-Salah, he was so careful about adab and respect that if a student came into his class, and it's also recorded that there were so many great people that came into his class that, there was very little space for students. So like, you would have already ulama, you would have high officials, you have all these different people coming to his class that even normal students would have difficulty, packing themselves into that classroom. So it was a great class. And one of his conditions was that if he saw a student without correct attire, he would not allow them to come in. And more specifically, if they didn't have an imama on, if they didn't have their turban on, then he would not allow them to sit in that class. So he was so particular and meticulous about the sunnah and appearance, that he would actually tell them, no, you can't come in until you put it on. And this is not just Imam Ibn Salah. I have personally experienced this, as well as all the students that come from the same madrasa. Our principal, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect him and give him khair and keep him safe and healthy. He would not allow us to come into the class if we didn't have a turban on. And that was his rule. So he would see us and he would say that you don't have the proper attire on, and meaning the turban, and he would tell us that you have to stand outside until you put it on. So he's very particular about that. Now that's a specific thing about the Shaykh himself. It's not a condition for every class. You know, once the masajid start opening, I won't kick anyone out if they're not wearing a turban. You know, this is just a story to show us how important it was for them to have this specific adab. Another incident about adab in Syria, Shaykh Awwamah, he speaks about this in his book. He said that when students were walking with their teacher in Syria when he was younger, and they were outside, the students would opt to stand in front of the Shaykh when it was sunny, meaning that if they were able to block the sun from the Shaykh with their own faces, they would do so, because they didn't want the Shaykh to have any of that sunlight, or to have even a small amount of difficulty. This is how much respect they had. Another incident he mentions is that once in his madrasa, the Madrasa Shaybaniya, I believe, he was either a student or a teacher there at that time. The Grand Mufti of Aleppo, of Halab, came, and he was giving a lecture. And Shaykh Abdullah Sirajuddin, which was, I believe, the principal of that madrasa, he was also in the crowd, and then while the Grand Mufti was giving the lecture. So the Shaykh who wrote the book, he said that I watched Shaykh Abdullah Sirajuddin, the principal, who was in the crowd, and we were all listening to the bayan of the Grand Mufti. During that bayan, I saw Shaykh Abdullah Sirajuddin in the crowd start motioning at someone. And I believe he said it was one of the teachers there who was also in the crowd. And he started pointing at him and like signaling for him to move. He wasn't saying anything because that would disturb the lecture, but he was very serious, and he was pointing at him and he was signaling for him to move. And then Shaykh Awwamah, he said that I saw what he was doing, and then that teacher or that individual who was there, who was commanded to move, he was basically standing or sitting in the shadow of the Grand Mufti. So because he was sitting in the shadow of the Grand Mufti who was giving the lecture, Shaykh Abdullah Sirajuddin didn't like that. And he said that I don't want anyone to stand on his shadow, out of respect. So the teacher quickly moved aside. So this was a type of respect. Obviously, respect is not something between halal and haram or makruh. We can't say that this was a makruh action. It's fine to stand in a person's shadow. Everyone understands that. But a person, due to that respect, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise a person's ranks, because essentially he's not respecting the individual per se. He's respecting the knowledge that individual has. He's respecting the khidmah of deen that this person has done. So this was extremely important amongst the Salaf to have respect. So I wrote here different things: to have proper attire, proper posture. When generally when we're sitting in madrasa, we should sit in a specific way. And the scholars actually take this from Hadith Jibril, which is the second hadith that we will do in Al-Arba'in al-Nawawiyyah, and we'll explain that how Jibril alayhi salam came and the posture in which he sat. So we should pay attention to those things. Pay attention actually in class, so that's part of respect as well. We were even taught to pray 2 rak'ahs beforehand and to make dua, to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for us to understand and to give us tawfiq to practice upon what is learned. So what we can see here is that there's a very strong link between spirituality and between practicing, or between learning itself. So learning deen is a very spiritual journey. So we should make sure that we don't get too involved in academics without the spirituality. So we don't want that. We want to get involved in academia in the very in-depth masail when we get there, but we also want our spirituality to grow with us to that point. So we were also taught to write properly, and students are always told to write out sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Instead, when you write fast, when you're taking notes, sometimes we put a slot, we say Rasulullah, and then we'll put like a slot there to symbol sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But we're always recommended to write it out. And a lot of ulama say that no student who would write out sallallahu alaihi wasallam ever missed out on notes. So you won't miss out on notes, inshallah, if you write out sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And some people would actually practice this. They would just have a few sheets of paper and practice writing sallallahu alaihi wasallam quickly, so that they would be able to do that very quickly. So this is something that we should take care of, because it's our respect for our Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we write sallallahu alaihi wasallam instead of a sad. Some students, what they would do is they would write a sad there, and later on when they review the notes, they would fill in the blanks and write sallallahu alaihi wasallam later. But all of these, they're very meticulous in every aspect. And obviously we should treat our books with care. I personally have seen individuals who they cover their books so well, and they rebind them, and they do so much to take care of their books. And even the pens, they will take their pens and they'll design them, and they'll take a lot of care with that. So there's so many stories about respect, and we can go on and on. I'll even share some more some more stories. There's a few more stories about disrespect. So there's one story of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal again. He was a great Imam, and we know him as the Imam of the fourth madhab, but a great muhaddith as well. His son, Abdullah bin Ahmad bin Hanbal, Imam Ahmad's son, he once heard his father being asked by someone that, how come you have not heard from the Shaykh Ibrahim bin Sa'd? So back then, they would go through a lot of trouble and go through very distant travels in order to find rare shuyukh who had specific hadith that no one else had, and they would write them down and memorize those hadith. And inshallah, we'll get into that later when we do our hadith intensive, inshallah. Inshallah, we have that planned one of these months, inshallah. We'll get into that, talk about how the muhaddithin used to travel for the sake of hadith. But anyway, they would do this. So an individual came and said that, Imam Ahmad Ibrahim bin Sa'd, who was a great muhaddith, he used to live very close by. How come I don't hear you narrating from him, and you say you don't have many of his narrations? That doesn't make sense. You're traveling thousands of miles to gather hadith when someone is a great sheikh is at your doorstep, or your neighbor, and you're not gaining hadith from him. That doesn't make sense. So Imam Ahmad, he replied, and he said that we started sitting in his gatherings to gain hadith. He started teaching hadith, and we started sitting, all of us, and great ulama came. So you have this one great muhaddith, a sheikh, and you have other ulama sitting in front of him. So this was going on, and they were excited. They were gaining this hadith from this great scholar. Then he says, in the second gathering, a youngster came and he sat with us in the first row. So there was this youngster, he came and sat with the shuyukh. And obviously in that time, this was considered against the etiquette. In our time, it would make sense that, first come, first serve, you sit in the front, there's no problem. But they had specific etiquettes at that time. So amongst those etiquettes was that the shuyukh should sit in the front, because they're already shuyukh, they're already ulama, so they should sit in the front. So this youngster came and he sat alongside the shuyukh. So now Ibrahim bin Sa'd, he saw this and he became extremely angry. He became so angry, he said that, Wallahi, I will not transmit any hadith for a single year because of this act of disrespect. So he couldn't take this disrespect, and that's why he said this. To him, it was outrageous. To us, it's like, so what? He came there, he sat down, what's the problem? But this is how much respect they would have. They would have everything in order. And Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal said that he didn't teach for that year, and he passed away at the end of the year. So because he didn't teach and he swore or he took an oath, a qasam, that he won't teach for a year, he passed away that year, and I was unfortunate I could not get the hadith from him. So this is how they treated disrespect. Obviously, we have to apply that in our time, in our age. Whatever we find in our society to be disrespectful, we should avoid those things. Like imagine we're sitting in a halaqah, we have our shaykh in front of us, and then, I decide to eat a hamburger in front of him. Not a hamburger, but a halal burger in front of him. And, I have a drink there and I'm eating and doing all my stuff while listening. And now in our society, that would be considered disrespectful. So whatever we consider disrespectful, we should avoid those things. Always have the respect of the shaykh, the majlis itself, respect for deen itself. And that will, inshallah, prevent us from these things. Another incident, if I can continue with that, inshallah we'll finish the next time on Thursday, will be our last day regarding the adab lessons. So Imam Burhan al-Biqai is a great scholar in the past. He mentioned that once a young foreigner came, so this individual came from a different place that Imam Biqai did not, he's never heard of this individual, never seen him. This youngster came and he said that, please let me learn by you. Let me learn your knowledge of hadith, of tafsir, of all of these things. So he said, fine, you can sit. And again, let me just put the context there, that they had a specific context and a specific background of what they considered to be adab, which we may not consider to be against the etiquettes and adab in our time. So this youngster came, and Imam Burhan al-Biqai said that, let's start, we will do the lesson. So he came and he sat cross-legged in front of him. So this youngster, he came and he sat cross-legged, which, we do all the time in the masjid. But this to him was so disrespectful. He refused to teach him. And he said that you require more adab than the knowledge that you came to seek. So before you try to gain this knowledge, you must gain adab first. So this was basically how much they had respect for knowledge. And this comes back to Hadith Jibreel, which is the second hadith which I referred to. The way Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sat, it says in the hadith, فَأَسْنَدَ رُكْبَتَيْهِ إِلَى رُكْبَتَيْهِ وَوَضَعَ كَفَّيْهِ عَلَى فَخِذَيْهِ. So when Jibreel alayhi salam came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the way they would sit was how we sit in tashahhud. So it says that he put his knees onto Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam's knees, meaning they were in front of him. So that is the method or the way they would sit in the past. So they used to think of this as a great form of disrespect. All the madrasa students that go to a traditional madrasa or a school of learning, they also experience this. I've had some of my shuyukh, they were very lenient and they allowed us to sit the way we wanted, cross-legged or any other way. And if we had a udhar or a leg that was aching or an issue, then we were allowed to stretch our legs out, right, and sit with our legs out. So that was understandable. But there were certain shuyukh that were very strict on us as well. So if they saw us sitting cross-legged, they would ask, do you have an issue? And if you say no, then they would say, then you should sit the proper way. So they would point these things out during the class. So this was all because of the value of knowledge that they had. They valued knowledge so much that they would avoid any type of disrespect or something that it can even allude to a type of disrespect. There's a great scholar in the past, in the recent past actually, Maulana Anwar Shah Kashmiri, great scholar, was famous for his memory. He was nicknamed like the walking library, because he would memorize all books that he would read. So he said that he never touched any books without wudu. So whenever he was touching any type of book, because of the respect for knowledge, he would make sure that he had wudu. So we all speak about his great knowledge, but look at the respect that he had. And some incidents that I experienced personally when I first attended madrasa. When I first attended madrasa, I didn't know any better. I was just a kid. when I attended, one of my teachers saw me with my books. So I had, a stack of books. I had my Quran as well. I had other books, other textbooks that I had, and they were in no particular order. I just picked them up and I was walking. So, by chance, the Quran was in the middle. So I had a few books, books on du'as that we had to memorize, books on very basic fiqh and Islamic law. So the Quran was in the middle. Some other books were on top of that. So my teacher saw that and he stopped me and he said that, wait, you should put the Quran on top. So he just very kindly said that, but it really, struck me that, wow, like this was actually a form of disrespect in it. And I had not even paid attention to that. I didn't mean it, so obviously there's no sin there. But why don't we, respect when we can, So he pointed that out to me, and alhamdulillah, I try my best to have the Quran on top always. So it's so amazing, the beautiful teachings of Islam. You will find in the books of fiqh even, that they speak, the more intricate books that are very large, so they speak more about masail. They have in there which books to put in which order. Subhanallah. They say that put the Quran first. If you have a stack of books, they tell you the order of books as well. So Quran first, then you have hadith, then you'll have fiqh, then you'll have adab, meaning books of literature, and so on and so forth. So it's really amazing how they have, our deen is so complete, and how much it's just really amazing, every aspect of deen. And I think this is quite important, so that's why I'm sharing all these different incidents. Another incident of a famous sheikh, I won't say his name, but he's a famous sheikh, and many of you probably know the story about him as well. When he was studying, he traveled overseas. He studied, very, very traditionally, sitting at the feet of ulama. So he was just a general, like, everyone else, like us. We were just American kids. We went overseas to study. He did the same thing. We didn't really know about these etiquettes, or to us, it didn't seem like it was a thing that went against the etiquette. So he was sitting in front of his sheikh, and he had one of those reed pens. That was very classical. He was studying with a classical type of pen. And so during the dars, he began to use the pen to take out a little bit of the sand and dirt that got under his fingernails. He wasn't really thinking about it, that I'm using a pen to do that. He was just doing it. So his teacher, I forgot if he said like his teacher like threw a rock next to him to get his attention, or what the teacher did. But he got his attention, and the teacher was upset. And he said that don't do that. Don't clean your nails with the qalam, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took a qasam in the Quran with the qalam. Noon wal qalami wa ma yasturun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says by the pen. So it is a tool for us to gain knowledge. So even the pen deserves respect. So all of these things, when we have it in our lives, it beautifies our lives, and it gives us the qadasa and the honor and reverence for knowledge. And really what this is reverence for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This knowledge comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when the knowledge is coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why shouldn't we respect this knowledge? So the more respect we have for knowledge, the more we will get the nur of ilm. And we said in the past that knowledge is not just information, Knowledge is not information. Knowledge is a nur that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to us. And this light, this divine light, allows us to understand deen, to practice on it. It illuminates us and it enriches us. Another incident, my principal that I was speaking about before, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect him and grant him good health and khair in dunya and akhirah. When he was a student, I've heard stories of this. And when he was a student, you guys see this picture in the background? That's specifically why I put this picture in the background. This book, I'm not sure if everyone can see, but the background, the picture is As-Siraji fil Mirath. So this book this picture is actually a book, right? This is the first page of the book As-Siraji fil Mirath. So this is inheritance, Islamic inheritance. I learned this in my 4th year of our Uloom course. So as you can see, you have this big text, like the big box. The page on the left is the cover page, so it's just designs, and the page on the right is the first page of the book. It's actually supposed to, it's kind of inverted, I believe. It's supposed to be the other way around, because we start from the right in Arabic. So anyway, it says Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. So that's the book it's starting. So that's the book. It's legible. It's fine. But as you can see on the sides, you can see this writing that's slanted. I don't know if you can see that. So it's writing that's slanted. That is the footnotes of the book. So my Shaykh, my principal, what he would do, and is famous about him when he was a student, and this is a fairly smaller book. We have the books of Hadith, like Mishkat al-Masabih, which is taught in the 6th year. These are very large, and they have even larger hashiyas or footnotes like this. This is just an example. What he would do is, when he had to read the footnotes, he would move himself around the book. So sometimes the footnotes are upside down because they just write it like that. This is how they used to write, to save space or for the sake of beauty. So he would actually move around his book to read the footnotes, because he didn't want to disturb the book itself. He had so much respect for his book that he would move around his book. And it was very famous about him that he would do this. So, I mean, did he know at that age, when he was just a student, that he would become the principal of one of the largest madrasas, not only in South Africa, but the world? Like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes people because of that respect that they have. This is how much respect he had for the book, that what we would do is we would move the book, right? And I mean, I'm guilty of that too. I would move the book. I tried it for a day or two, move around the book, but I couldn't. It gets difficult after a while. But this was not something he heard of, something from someone before. It came out of his heart, this respect and honor that he had for knowledge. He didn't want to disturb the book. So this was something that really struck me. And in these incidents, sometimes they may seem very difficult for us to have, but these should motivate us to at least have a smaller or a lesser form of adab. Our Grand Mufti in our madrasa, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep him safe, healthy, preserve him, and allow the ummah to keep on benefiting from him. I remember when I was in 6th year, he made, there was an individual in the class that, they were studying late at night, and then in the morning they fell asleep. Like in the class, he was dozing off. And that happens, the students, they study up late, either they're preparing for exams or whatever it was. But he was dozing off in class. So then the teacher saw this, and the student was more than just dozing off. He was like actually going deeper into sleep. So, he said, stand up. So sometimes they would do that. They would say, please, they wouldn't say please, but they would say stand up. They would say gently. And then the student, they would feel ashamed because the whole class is looking at them. And then that, the shame would cause a lot of blood to rush to their face. And that was a great way of waking them up. So the teachers would do that as well. So he made this boy stand, right? My classmate. And so then he said that, pick up your book as well. And these books, I don't know if you guys have seen some of these Islamic books. This was Hidayah Thalith, which was, it's quite large. Before attending madrasa, I have never seen a book that large before. These books are like, I don't know, this is maybe twice as tall as a normal book. You have to see these one day, inshallah. If I can, I'll bring an example once the Masjid opens up. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open our Masjid up. So I'll bring one of these to show you guys how large these books are. So the boy, he picked up the book, right? So he was holding it at the two ends of the book, and he wasn't holding the spine. So, and these are very large books. So then our Mufti Sahib, he was fine at first. He just said, stand up. But when he saw this, he became very upset. And he kind of, yelled at the student, and he said that, hold it in the middle. What are you doing? He was really upset at that. So he wasn't so upset at the fact that the student was asleep, but he became upset when he saw the disrespect to the book. Now, the student probably didn't know any better. He probably never had to hold a book like that. Usually we have big desks to hold our books. But because of that, our Mufti Sahib, he was very upset. And then I'll speak about another incident when I was studying another one of my teachers. I saw how he used to treat the book. So we would study in a library. This was postgraduate studies. So we would do research, but we would have our sheikh there, and we would have all our books around us. So I clearly remember our sheikh, he would tell us to dust all the books. So we had a duster, we had to dust all the books, make sure everything's properly set up. So when he would tell us, give me this book for a reference when he was teaching. So if the book had dust on it, he would be like, it would hurt him. He wouldn't be angry or upset, but you could see like the pain on his face. He would first, every book he does this, he holds it and he cradles it almost, like almost like a baby. So he would hold it in his hand, and then he would blow the dust off. And then, depending on how much dust came off, you could see the more like, exaggerated pain on his face. I would say exaggerated pain because, he just wants us to understand that this is not something that you want to do. And then he would get the duster and he would like, dust it very nicely. And he was very particular with the books. So much so once a student, the teacher would ask us, what did you do? Which research did you do? Which hadith did you find? Things like that. Anything interesting, he would talk to us. We would have conversations. So one student, he actually found something very interesting. So when it came to his time to speak, then the sheikh was very interested. He was smiling. They were all, laughing and happy. And then the sheikh looked at his desk, and this individual had, and this is a pet peeve of my sheikh. So this individual had his book, one of the textbooks, a book of hadith. So in the book, it wasn't his, it was part of the library. To save his page, as a bookmark, he put a pencil inside the book. So it's all the way inside the book, the pencil, and he closed the book. So when the sheikh saw this, he became very upset. And despite the find that the student made, the sheikh just couldn't, focus on it anymore. He's like, I can't believe you did that. I told you not to do this before. When you do that, you put a book, or I'm sorry, you put a pencil or something large in between the pages of a book, and you close it like that all the way, and then you place other books on top of that. What it does is it breaks the binding. So he was so particular about that. He was like, don't treat your books bad, because they also have a sort of longevity. You want these books to last. When you buy a book, it lasts you for your whole life. Now, if you break the binding, then you may be able to still benefit from that book because it's still somewhat okay. But the generations that come later, they won't be able to benefit. So all of these things he would be very careful about. He even told us how to take out a book. He said, when you take out a book from the shelf, don't pull it from the binding. It's, because if you keep doing that, that binding will rip off. So all of these things, they were very particular about adab and respect. And it's just something that, this is the hilya, or the jewelry of a student, the beautification of a student of true knowledge is respect. We would have good terms to speak with our shuyukh. Some people, the students of Sham, they say Sidi or Sheikh, or if you're from the subcontinent, they would say Maulana, or they would say Ustad. They would use a title for the Sheikh. We have to have respect for ourselves, carry ourselves in a great manner. We are the students of knowledge. We should have this fakhr and pride that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me knowledge of deen. I'm not a normal individual. And we should feel that, my classmates are also great people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them the knowledge of deen. So we should have respect for everything. So that is something, and I took the whole dars speaking about this, about respect, because I feel like it's very important. This is one of the greatest aspects of adab for a student of knowledge. So tomorrow, inshallah, we will actually speak about caution and verification. So I'm sorry, not tomorrow, but Thursday, inshallah, we will speak about that. And inshallah, we'll wrap it up and we'll finish by Thursday. And by next Tuesday, inshallah, we'll start with the seerah, or the life story of Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah. And inshallah, after that, we'll begin the Arba'in al-Nawawi. So I hope this was beneficial, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us that adab, that respect, give us tawfiq to be true bearers of the knowledge of deen. And this comes with a lot of responsibility. And one of those responsibilities is to respect knowledge and respect the bearers of knowledge and to respect ourselves. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept us and also give us tawfiq to utilize these 10 days wisely, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that ما من أيام العمل الصالح أحب فيه من هذه الأيام, that there is no days throughout the year in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves to be worshipped more than these days. So we should really take advantage of these days. Actions are very valuable in these 10 days. So we can fast, we can perform tahajjud, we can do many different things. So let us take time and do these things. And these durus are an excellent way to utilize these 10 days. We're learning about the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we're actually, inshallah, we're going to implement that into our lives. So what a great way to use these 10 days, inshallah. So jazakumullahu khairan for attending the dars, and inshallah I hope to see all of you soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.